Hello everyone, today I'll be demonstrating a full combat session in the World of Darkness environment to give you an idea of how a full combat turn plays out. Here we have three characters engaging in combat. It's going to be a 2 versus 1. So as with usual, the first stage in any combat turn is to determine who goes first. For that you roll initiative. One's initiative is combined by their dexterity plus wits plus 1 manual roll die, and the total sum determines how quick you act and react in a given turn. In our case, the first to declare is the archer, my character, seeing as he had the lowest sum, 7. That inherent advantage is given to only those who have highest initiative, so even though I have declared my action first, I act last, meaning they get to see what I intend to do and react accordingly. So that's the main benefit of having higher initiative. Now, I should mention that you can only move a certain amount of yards or meters in a turn. By default, you can sprint 20 yards plus 3 times your dexterity rating. Movement is reflexive though, so you don't actually need to roll anything for it as long as you're on even terrain. You only roll if you're like trying to jump off a rock or something like that. Once everyone's declared their action, the first player with the highest initiative begins the third stage, which is rolling. Then you would roll your character's traits, usually 1 attribute plus 1 ability. You can see this chart here to see what's what. If you move in a turn and also perform an action, then you can only sprint half of the distance you would otherwise run, but you can still act and move. Alistair declared using a block with his shield, which acts as a melee for the purpose of rolling. Since it's a defensive action, it happens at any point in the turn, so it will occur as soon as I attack. To determine the outcome of any action, you would roll dice and then compare the successes. For example, my archery check will be dexterity plus archery, difficulty 6. Alistair will roll his block with a dexterity melee 6. Since we both have 2 successes, that's a tie. In any tie, the defender always wins as a rough rule of thumb. So since he blocked, I cannot do any damage. By now everyone can move closer. That's the end of the turn 1. Nothing really happened. I just wasted an arrow. Now we will begin the second turn. We roll initiative once again. Unless there's more than 5 people or the storyteller says so, usually you reroll every time. Although if you prefer, you can choose 1 initiative at the beginning and just stick with it. Here we have the second turn's declarations. Cicero is going to do 1 attack, and Alistair is doing 1 attack also. Normally you can only do 1 action per turn, unless you split your dice pool, in which case you can do multiple actions, but you will be penalized by having a much smaller chance of success. In this case, I will do 3 actions, which is to withdraw my knife and do 2 dodges, 1 for Cicero and 1 for Alistair. Since Cicero is a bit injured and he isn't as fast as Alistair, I will put much less effort to dodge his attacks. But we will see how it plays out in a bit. To split your dice pools, you will need to compare which one is the lowest. So if you're going to, for example, dodge and also attack someone with a punch, then you would compare your brawl plus dexterity with your athletics plus dexterity, and whichever sum is lowest between the two, that's your dice pool. And let's say if your dexterity is 4, brawl is 3, and athletics is 4, then you can only use the lower of the two, so that's 7 dice, which you can then, let's say, put 3 dice to dodge and 4 dice to punch someone. Or you can split it like 6 versus 1, either way works, it's up to you entirely. As you can see, I used the willpower point, which you can expand to get 1 automatic success on any action once per turn. Throwing a small dagger is pretty easy, so I succeeded very easily. Then Alistair rolls his attack. The attack difficulty depends on the weapon you use. So for short swords that is 5. There's also a bit of a complication here since I'm being attacked by 2 enemies at the same time. I get +1 to my difficulties. If you were to be attacked by 4 enemies, you would add +3 and so on, up to a maximum of +4. So for every 1 additional enemy beyond the first, you get +1 difficulty for all actions. My block failed, my dodge rather, so Alistair gets 2 successes. Those become net successes, which he can then use to determine damage. Damage is determined by rolling your strength plus the weapon rating, so a bigger sword will do more damage than like a knife, for example, plus the net successes you achieved. As you can see here, he calculated his strength as 3, short sword 2, and 2 nets for a total of 7 dice, which he then manually rolled with /m roll, 7, and the difficulty for damage is always 6. He got 3 successes, which means he deals 3 lethal. As a human, I can't normally soak lethal, but I do have armor. So I will roll stamina 8 to soak lethal, and then with my armor I soak at difficulty 6. I will roll them separately. Now, since I botched the second attack, the second roll for my armor, that means I get -1 success on the other roll. If you botch in general, then it would be a catastrophic failure, although for soaking and damage, this is simply a fail. In either case, the sum of my soak rating would be 1 success out of 3, meaning I get 2 lethal at resolve. Damage is applied at the end of any turn. I should mention as a bit of a caveat that for multiple actions, you only perform the first one in your turn, and then the rest are performed in stage 3 at the end of everyone's action, unless they also do multiple actions. This was the end of turn 2. Usually at resolve, a storyteller will narrate what happened. In this case, I was simply cut rather shallowly by a sword. Not much else to say. Then we roll initiative again. If 2 characters tie their initiative order, then you would determine their wits first to see who goes first. So for example, Cicero has wits 3, I have wits 1. That means he's of higher initiative. If the wits are tied as well, then you compare the dexterity rating instead. And if those are tied as well, then you simply compare the rolls. In this turn, I allowed Alistair to hit me without actually defending, and then I will hit Cicero with my dagger. Cicero is employing a buckler shield, which gives him difficulty 4 to parry attacks. But since he's wielding it with his offhand, that means he also rolled a difficulty 5. Whereas I would roll the dagger at difficulty 4, +1 from multiple opponents. We will then compare successes. As you can see, I have 5 successes, 4 + 1, whereas he has 2 + 1 for 3, meaning I get 2 net successes to determine damage. The rundle daggers don't give any bonus to strength rolls, so I will simply roll my strength 4 + 2. Effectively, I'm rolled 6 to determine the damage. However, since I failed my roll, I do no damage at all. It simply means the blade failed to pierce into his flesh or whatever. Now, leaving myself defenseless here didn't quite work out since I failed my stamina checks pretty badly. And since I took 3 lethal, which exceeds my stamina of 2, it means I am stunned for the turn. Effectively, I cannot do anything rather than just stumble in a daze, and then for the next turn, they get -2 difficulty to hit me. And that brings us to the last turn. I couldn't even act, whereas they could simply rain attacks on me. I will draw attention to Cicero, who decided to attack my arm instead, which is not protected by armor. That means that I cannot benefit from my soak benefit and bonuses. However, to target a non-armored spot, you need to add extra difficulty to the targeting roll. Normally the short sword is rolled at difficulty 5, but he gained -2 difficulty from the stun and +1 from the targeting to avoid the armor. He rolled at difficulty 4, got 2 successes, and then rolled 3 lethal of damage, which I can already soak with stamina 8. This dealt me another 2 lethal out of 7, which means I am now incapacitated, so pretty much knocked out. and bleeding to death unless someone saves him. Alistair tried to use willpower to cancel his attack since they were trying to capture me. Otherwise he would deal too much damage and essentially finish me off. But he failed the attempt to stop himself in time. To cancel an attack, you must roll willpower 6 or spend a point. And here we have the resolve of the last turn. The archer has been taken down, and unless someone saves him, he will bleed out and die very soon. That's the sum of a scene. It took 4 turns. In game time it took about 20 minutes to determine this, although that's because I narrated everything. As experienced players, you could probably get it done in like 3 minutes per turn max. The system may seem a bit complicated, but I recommend to try it out with your friends or inexperienced players. Either way, don't be too scared to make mistakes. It happens to all of us. At the end of the day, we're just here to have fun, so there will be no lawsuits filed over this. Best of luck.